Death Note is trash. It's hot garbage. Not that one. This one. Yeah, that's the crap one. I mean, like, it's alright, but it's way worse than you think it is. Like, actually terrible. Just so you know, there's gonna be, like, major spoilers for Death Note in this video. I mean, like, it came out a decade ago, so I probably don't have to say that. But for those weirdos out there who clicked on a video about a decade-old show that they've never seen, I mean, you've been warned, I guess. I'm also not going to explain the plot in any detail. We're just kind of assuming that you've seen the show, because why would you be watching this if you haven't? With that said, let's get started. I recently went through and rewatched Death Note, and for me, when I first saw it, it was my first jump into proper anime. I think a lot of 20-somethings grew up on DBZ, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Even if they never really got into anime, I think a lot of people around that age have still seen those shows. For me, and I think a lot of people my age, Death Note was the show that I watched, and I recognized that it wasn't a cartoon, that it was anime. And that's not saying that those other shows aren't anime. I mean, obviously they are, but just that we didn't process them as anime. When we were just kids, we watched them like they were Saturday morning cartoons. But with Death Note, it was something different. A lot of people have different shows that was the first thing that got them into anime when they were young. But for myself, and I think a lot of others, Death Note was that show. So, when I wanted to get my girlfriend into anime, I thought, hey, Death Note would be a good stepping stone, because it was, my intro to anime. And despite everything I'm going to say in this video, it worked out fine. I mean, she enjoyed it well enough and has gotten into a lot of other series and has been watching a lot of modern ongoing shows, but I hated it. And it was really just a single choice that killed the show for me. And because of this, I really wouldn't recommend you use it as an intro to anime for anyone. No, it's not that. I know you think it's that. I know a lot of people think it's that, but it's not that. I think that the show actually died way before they killed L. And there were two specific points that killed the show. And these points are why I'm making this video, because I don't see a lot of people talking about it. Maybe because the show's a decade old and no one cares. But to me, people saying that L dying was dumb seems like those people are missing the issue. For me, the episode happened as early as episode 10, and that issue is Misa. Now, she didn't actually appear in episode 10, but the tapes that she made were introduced in that episode, and for me, that's solidifying her as a character, and is the moment that killed the show. Now, before we go any further, I want to clear the air a little bit. I don't dislike Misa as a character. I don't think that she killed the show in the sense that her presence annoyed me and made me dislike the show. In fact, I didn't even realize she was a problem until after my most recent viewing of the show. See, Death Note is at its best when it's a game of cat and mouse between L and Light. I think that's a pretty commonly accepted opinion, and I think that's what everyone really loves the show for, and I think that's what makes it recognizable. I mean, even the first intro to the show demonstrates this by having those two stand as pillars that oppose each other. The clash of their ideals and seeing them use their intelligence and wit to try and find out each other's identity is what makes that show iconic. The problem with this fundamental concept is L is actually far superior to Light. From episode 1, Light makes mistakes. He slips up and does things that put L on his trail. He recovers from the mistakes well, and as he realizes his mission and becomes a lot more of a zealot, he makes far fewer mistakes. This is interesting because we get to see Light grow and adapt, but it also allows L to realistically close in on him. In fact, L is already suspecting Light of being Kira by episode 10, before Misa's introduced. Up until this point, it's been a relatively straightforward affair. Just Light versus L. They each have their supporting cast that assist them, Ryuk and the police force respectively. But the supporting cast doesn't really offer much. They hardly provide anything to the game and are almost never a roadblock against their side. This supporting cast is good because it gives the protagonists a sounding board to explain their logic. They essentially serve as the audience, giving the writers an excuse for the protagonists to walk through their plans. Now, at episode 10, we're nearing a point where L is about to close in on Light. I'm first going to explain what I think should happen, and then say what did happen. What should happen is L should win. In 3 episodes. Literally 3 episodes. Just cut the show into a third of what it is right now. Modern anime has warmed me up to that good old-fashioned 13 episodes. It's just a really good length. Doesn't have a show drag on too long, and basically any show that isn't long-running shonen is either 13 or 26-ish episodes. As they should be. Have the next 3 episodes be L knowing for a fact that Light is Kira, and just trying to prove it, all while Light is getting more and more desperate, and thus making more mistakes. See, L deserves to win because he's made fewer mistakes, he's been more intelligent, and he is on the side of the law. I know I sound like I'm saying you never should have killed L, and I kind of agree with that, but that's not my big issue with the show. Killing L would have been one thing, but they took it a step further and kind of ruined the show fundamentally. See, they decided to just throw an extra player into the game. They introduced Misa, who is working alongside Light, but actually works against him pretty frequently, mostly by sheer ignorance of how to be a supervillain. This forces Light into desperation mode, and at that point, he does the stupidest thing that any writer could have thought, and just turns himself in. 6 episodes after Misa's introduced, Light goes up to El and is like, hey bro, I think I might be evil. Lock me up? And I mean, El just kind of does, because I guess why not? I mean, he says to, so sure. Then, while in prison, Light gives up the Death Note, so he loses all memory of being Kira, and basically turns into a boring character until episode 26, where he returns to his usual Kira activity. Honestly, this is just straight up dumb. I don't hate this because it's a bad plan. Light's plan eventually works out and results in him being able to kill El. I hate this from a story perspective. You essentially throw out every good idea you've had for the entire show and say, how about we just make Light not be Kira for literally 11 episodes? Just for the middle third of the show, just have Light be like annoying and less interesting and not a sociopath. Honestly, once this section was over, I didn't even care anymore that they killed El. I was just thanking God that we could finally have the protagonist that the show promised us back. These 11 episodes are the most boring and grueling episodes in Death Note to watch. They threw out that cat and mouse game that we loved so much and made it be like a weird crime drama where you don't really know who to root for or who any of the antagonists are, and how literally none of them have any motivation other than money, and none of them are doing anything compelling in any way. And you've got El, who's just sitting there like, dang dude, none of this makes sense. Like, I thought Light was Kira, but now it doesn't seem like he is, and what the heck does that mean? And like, is this all just magic? And I mean, it's not really his fault, because it is literally just magic, but like, I mean, seriously, who thought this was a good idea? Like, any of it. Just like, actually any of it. Like, have you watched this middle section recently? Like, God, I don't even care about that Nier Automata little prick, or his candy-loving little Armin-looking friend who's, like, not really his friend, but is kind of his friend, and they grew up together. Like, honestly, I don't even care. Like, that's fine. Because they at least tried with those guys, right? They tried to make them interesting and compelling, and it ended up being weird and not really what anyone wanted, but, like, this is not as bad as what they did in the middle part. Like, that middle third just makes no sense. It honestly, that part of the show just plays out like a completely different show. Like, it's no longer about Kira versus El, it's a story about corporate corruption. And I understand the point of this section, right? The idea is to showcase how Light isn't evil, but how the Death Note corrupts people. Light at his base level is actually a pretty decent and moral good person, and you can see this from the moment that Light gives up the Death Note. He basically, like, has rounder eyes and a cherub-like face. Like, you just literally see him turning into a good person. But, like, why did you spend 11 episodes to tell us that, instead of just leaving that scene where he just magically turns into a good person, and then immediately everyone's like, oh, it looks like he's not actually that bad now? Like, why did you spend the entire middle third of the story just to talk about this? Like, if you wanted to expand it beyond just that one scene, you can spend a couple of episodes to talk about how the Death Note is the problem, and it's not Light, it's that this power, this weapon, corrupts people. It doesn't take 11 episodes to tell you that. Why did you just make our two protagonists just be like little wimps and super boring for literally 1/3 of the show? And honestly, like, I got nothing to say about that last third. Like, everyone's torn it apart already. People generally agree there's a decline in quality at that part, and I don't really want to rehash old ideas. I mean, like, you probably didn't like it. I mean, it was fine, but it was a step down from the early part. Just, here's my issue with Death Note, right? Literally 1/3 of the show is what I want. 1/3 of the show is what it tells me it's going to be like and actually fulfills the promise. 1/3 of the show is El versus Light. But instead of just having El versus Light and then ending it at its logical conclusion, they made it drag on. The desire to keep the show going for longer than 13 episodes introduced Misa, and Misa ended that cat and mouse game that we wanted by just knocking all the pieces over and saying, deal with it. She led to Light turning himself in, effectively making the show weird and not good for 11 episodes until a super contrived and just way too long of a plan worked out. Then the next logical step is to kill El so that Light can keep being Kira, and then they introduce 2 kids to fight him, and when they eventually win, we kind of just don't even care anymore because it's gone on so long, and like, who even are you kids, and how old are you supposed to be, and what was the point of any of this? Death Note is trash because the writer didn't know when to end it. There are so many shows out there that just keep going on and are too long and drawn out. And I know that 37 episodes isn't that long, but when you pace the investigation and the show as quick as you do in the first 10 episodes, you've backed yourself into a corner where the only logical conclusion is to end it soon, but you choose not to. I haven't seen people discuss this issue with Death Note before, so I hope I'm not just repeating old ideas about a decade-old show that basically everyone already thought. Hopefully there was something in this that was original or had value in some way. I don't know. I'll be honest, I got no clue what people's opinions on Death Note are nowadays. I just remember in high school everyone talking about how killing L was dumb, and I sort of just assumed that everyone had that same simple view of the show without ever talking about the bigger issue it had. I mean, Death Note is trash, but I also kind of think this whole video is trash too, so I don't know, man. Hope it was fun.